Welcome to QNN Sports. I'm Jordan Wolf, and while there are a lot of Quinnipiac spring sports heating up, one sport that typically doesn't play in the spring that is playing in the spring this year is Quinnipiac Field Hockey. And who is my guest today? Q30 Quinnipiac Field Hockey beat reporter Izzy Agricola. So Izzy, this is a team that usually doesn't play in the spring, as they played in the fall pretty much their entire existence at QU, but this year they have to play in the spring because of circumstances. So how have they adjusted to that so far?
So a big thing going into preseason that head coach Becca Main talked about was the fact that it allowed them a lot of time to not only practice, but to get closer as a team. She had talked about how when we were in deep quarantine about a year ago today, they were doing Zoom calls. And at that time, they weren't quite sure what was going on with their season, but they definitely had a close bond from the beginning. And the three things that she really wanted to focus on in their essentially year break, since they've played a little more than a year, is the fitness, their depth, and their specialty situations. So that was a big thing for her in all of the time that they had off. She really talked about creating a close bond with the team and making sure that they're working on the little things so that when they get back on the field, they can really show what they have.
Talked about her a little bit in your answer, Becca Main. She's been here for over 25 seasons. What do you think she brings to this year's specific team?
I think that all the players just have such a respect for her, and I talked about how she really cultivated that team energy, and even in post-game press conferences, you can really tell the respect that the players have for her. And I think her coming in with experience, whether this season is going to be fantastic or whether it's not, they really have just like the utmost respect for her, and she's a good coach, and she knows how to work with her players when they are playing against, they're in a hard conference, and I'm not going to deny that. They're playing against teams like UConn, who have been national champions. They're playing against teams like Liberty, who are #1 in the NCAA. So I think that in order to kind of get her team going, she really instills a good sense of leadership, not only coming from herself, but coming from the bench, coming from her assistant coaches, and coming from her captains.
So we talked about it earlier. This is one of the first time they've been playing since 2019. So for those who are not familiar with it, what was really the story behind that team?
So in the 2019 season, I definitely came down a little hard on them at the end of the season, and Becca Main did as well. She actually called it one of the worst seasons in Quinnipiac Field Hockey history. And I definitely agreed with her on that because I felt like they had the talent and they just weren't showcasing it in the way that I thought they could. And I don't think that blame goes to anyone. I'm very not like playing the blame game with that. Like, oh, it was this player. Oh, it was Becca Main. I don't think that goes to anyone. I think when they're playing in a hard conference like the Big East, it's really hard to beat a team like UConn. And I think that she does a really good job of cultivating that team dynamic. So even when they are having that bad season, I mean, they haven't had a winning season since 2013. So that's a tough thing to combat. And 2019 was no different. They didn't have a winning season. This year, I honestly don't think it'll be different. But this year, I mean, I would put an asterisk on just this year because it's all conference play. It's kind of hard to be able to get that 500 season. But I think that in 2019, they just hadn't mesh as well as a squad as I had hoped they would, but they have a lot of talent. I mean, you look at players like Juliana Capello and Brooke Whipkey and Jess Halley, and they just have so much talent, so much background. And then even the class of 2024 coming in this year has a lot of background where they're winning awards, they're New Jersey Player of the Year, they're this and that. And so I think that in 2019, the story was it was disappointing. And then I think this year they're kind of using that disappointment and that inability to get that winning season to kind of bring it to a new level this year, especially since they're playing in a totally different season.
Right. So obviously this year they've only played 4 games so far, but what's something that's really caught your eye?
One thing that has caught my eye is just the fact that they never give up. When they're playing against UConn, who they lost to the other day big, you can see that none of those players ever gave up. They're always running. They're always trying to press. They're always pushing forward. And even Becca Main said after that disappointing UConn loss, she said, we weren't necessarily going out there to score a lot of goals. We wanted to keep them under a certain number of goals. And I think they did that. And I think their ability to accept, hey, we're playing UConn. They're a really good team. We might not be able to beat them, but this is what we're going to go do. And this is what we're going to practice and keep developing the program further and further. And so until they're on the same page as UConn is something that I find really admirable, because I think that's such a good thing to have about yourself and say, hey, we might not beat this team today, but we're going to go out there and we're going to try our hardest and we're not going to give up.
Obviously, this is a bit early so far, like I just said, but what's one thing that you would like to see them improve upon moving on this season?
I want to see them get more of those penalty corners that I talked about earlier. In a bunch of games this year, I don't have the direct stats with me right now, but they've been basically sourced on penalty corners where the other teams were getting a lot more than them. And I think they have a really good core on their offensive penalty corners to be able to get in there and get those goals. I mean, they have Juliana Capello, who's basically just like a ball demon. Like, she's always going to be searching for that ball, always can get it in the back of the net when she needs to. So I think being able to get those offensive penalty corners and not get as many defensive penalty corners is going to be really important for them this year, because I think that's going to open up the scoring opportunities for them that they don't necessarily have on a fast break.
Obviously, you mentioned before how they play in-conference opponents. So with that said, what would you think is the ceiling for this squad this year?
I think the ceiling is going to be their ability to beat Providence the next 3 times that they play them. I think that they're not going to be able to, like I said, I've said this before, they're not going to be able to beat UConn if that's their ceiling. And I think that I don't think they're going to be able to, like I said, I don't think they're going to be able to beat UConn, and I don't think they have any conceptions about them beating UConn. So I think that's a point where it kind of stops the train, but I don't think that's going to stop them from continuing to work hard, continuing to strive. And I think one thing that they can do this year is going to be beating Providence the next 3 times that they play them.
Okay. All right. Well, Izzy, thank you for your time. I'm Jordan Wolf. This has been an edition of QNN Sports with Q30 Field Hockey beat reporter Izzy Agricola. Once again, Izzy, thank you for your time. Good luck the rest of the way.
Thank you so much, Jordan.